Currently, the current stage as agriculture on St. Martin is at its minimum capacity due to a few different factors. Things such as flat land space, which is limited, but still does not, let's say, exclude the fact that we cannot utilize hillside spaces to be able to be productive with agriculture. Limited access to resources. For example, this last year, for the past 4 years, has been a great example with an organization like R4CR, for example, that really brought resources, to NGOs locally that empower them to make steps within their community. So resources is something that's definitely lacking when it comes to getting agriculture up off of the ground. And this is why there's so limited activity going on due to a lack of resources too as well. When we look at limited commercial space, commercial projects, so even though we might not have flat land space, we still have places where we can be let's say, have diversified projects when it comes to technology implementations within them too, which makes it a little bit more easier to move forward in an innovative time. So right now, when you look at limited commercial production projects, there's like one project on the friend side with Farm for You, for example, that does pretty good with lettuce, but then it's still limited. Because if everybody decides to buy lettuce tomorrow, they still won't be able to be to a level of sustainability, right? So we need more current commercial-like projects to be inclusive in the development of agriculture moving forward. Things like limited incentives too as well, water, current. Just a brief example, I've been paying water at the farm, for example, for the past 12 years. 150 gillas, maximum 250 gillas. And then when this whole situation with GB occurred, I get a bill for like 890 gillas. Things like this, for us as farmers is difficult because we depend on a lot of water. So when there's no water incentives, electrical incentives, tax incentives, these different things, it makes it even more difficult to be able to push agriculture to a certain capacity and still keep it cost-friendly and affordable to the general public. So we have to keep that in mind. We need more commercial production projects in order to complement our agricultural product. Limited incentives too as well. We need those as well to empower our agricultural projects. Limited policies and laws. I know a few years back, government started off with the agricultural policy. I'm not too sure at this point, for example, how far along that has been doing government any great use, or if there's any laws or any other legislations that came out of that policy to continue to empower the development of agriculture. Because again, we also need that type of reinforcement from government to be able to back agriculture if we do want to see it become a reality. As you know, every other country in the Caribbean, the biggest agricultural incentives are basically supported by governments. We have limited education and participation within our schools. Because again, we coming up in a Caribbean country where we have good weather and good soil, we come from a cultural background too, where agriculture was part of our heritage. Over the course of years, we've substituted that for hospitality, which we see now is really just that one pillar that can no longer be firm for us to stand on. So we need to go back to the roots of things, and also going back to the roots of things really mean that we have to get our kids involved, because as those generations come up and don't build a certain love, appreciation, and admiration or passion for agriculture or environment, as you can see today, we have those same results: pollution, not too much environmental positive impacts, overdevelopment, all of these things. So I think to go back to educating the youth is fundamental on how we can be able to move forward for the future with having them lead the way, but also finding it that it's important and be able to love this thing that we call agriculture, because without that, again, there's limited sustainability also to mankind, and that's one thing that we definitely have to be very, very aware of as well. So with that, is really the current state of agriculture on the island. There's really nothing going on, and that's really because of all the following points. So with that in mind, there is still possibilities, but those points and agendas below need to be taken into consideration very seriously if we do want to make something a reality here on the island. All right, thank you. I'll also introduce my next colleague, if that's okay, Ms. Sharon Arnell, and she will touch base a little bit on how does agriculture contribute to the country's GDP, and does it have any potential overall?
So as just was stated, currently there are no real sustainable and structural investments in agriculture. Thus, the effect on our GDP is limited. However, if priority is given to the sector, it can have a substantial impact on our GDP. For example, when studying in the region, the impact in the region, we can see that the average GDP of agriculture increased from 4.5% in 2013 to 7% and increasing in 2023. And if we look more specifically at the different countries, we see the GDP contributions of over 8% and sometimes 20%. It is very important and interesting to note that the agriculture sector in these countries exists in tandem with the other sectors, such as industry and tourism. So to focus on agriculture as a diverse pillar is not competing with other sectors. Actually, it is complementing the other sectors. As we also see in our research, that this sector, as it develops, it can also have a positive impact on the labor force, where the economically inactive persons can have the opportunity for work in the agriculture sector, just contributing to the reduction of unemployment. As it pertains to the next slide. Yeah. So as it pertains to local product development, agriculture facilitates access to locally grown produce for entrepreneurs for their innovative ideas and creations. Examples such as using fresh and locally grown seasoned peppers to create pepper sauces, seasonings, fruit and vegetables used for coconut oil, jams, creation of soaps, juices, syrups, and other spices, and other artisanal products. There are many creative ideas and product production among the youth as well. And this gives them a sense of confidence and pride in creating products from fresh, homegrown produce. This brings me to the effect of agriculture on tourism. These days, tourists are seeking an experience. They are seeking an authentic experience of St. Martin's culture and traditions. As I just mentioned, artisanal products and the availability of local produce contribute to this experience for tourists, giving them an additional way to have a meaningful connection to our local community. What we see at our bi-weekly farmers market is where the tourists and community members eagerly visit to buy our products, produce, while at the same time they are engaging with each other, fostering a sense of community, creating new bonds and relationships. Agriculture also can have a positive effect on our local SMEs by providing them with new opportunities for diversification, as we know now that some of the markets are oversaturated. So there are many of the same type of businesses, small businesses, and it can provide new retail distribution points and allowing small businesses, micro, small, medium enterprises to grow and expand. So with this, I would like to convey to Parliament that we do see potential for growth of this pillar in St. Martin.
SXV insured? Do you have a valid medical insurance status? SXV is cardless. Request your My SXV account today and enter the virtual office of SXV. Go to sxv.sx and sign up now.
SXV, yeah. Your social health insurances.
It's time for a new brand that is as bold, vibrant, and colorful as the island of St. Martin, with colors drawn from our diversity, cultural heritage, and nature. Our breathtaking beaches, waters, and sun, the majestic brown pelican, our national symbol, the radiant yellow sage, our national flower, the historic border monument signifying the Dutch and French sides, our exciting cruise, yachting, and boating ports, renowned Maho Beach and St. Martin Airport, the hub to the Caribbean. All these parts come together to create the shape of the island of St. Martin. More than a logo. It's a new brand that engages, excites, and will inspire travelers to book. It's time to tell the St. Martin story, to reintroduce travelers to St. Martin, to honor our past, to embrace our present, and shape our future. Our culture and diversity, Dutch and French sides, unrivaled cuisine, twice the nightlife, entertainment, and shopping, cruises, boating, and yachting, twice the adventure, exploration, and relaxation, splendid and scenic accommodations, Pinel, Tentamar, and island hopping in the Caribbean. Whatever your taste, St. Martin has more. Experience twice the Caribbean. St. Martin.
The next questions I have are pertaining to the prison. Suspects who are in pre-detention at the police station are being released by the prosecutor's office due to lack of space. Everyday suspects are being released. It is only a few that are being transferred to Point Blanche. After sentencing, the inmates sit 2/3 of their time. The minister and/or the ministry are in charge of deciding on the release after sentencing. The minister gets advice from the probation officer, prison, and CCR for the advising part of the release. There is no actual role of the prosecutor. Minister, can you tell me if it is correct that the prosecutor has a huge say in who gets released after sentencing? If so, why and based on what law? With regard to preliminary detention, voorlopige hechtenis, the OM makes a case-by-case consideration based on, among others, the severity of the crime, the impact on the interest of the victims of a case, the impact of the crime overall, and the risks that a suspect poses to the community, and also, of course, the available cell capacity. Pursuant to Article 131, Paragraph 2 of the Criminal Code, detainees sentenced to more than 1 year may qualify for a conditional release after having served 2/3 of their sentence. By law, the Central Probation Board, the CCR, issues the final advice, but it is the Minister of Justice who decides whether the convicted person will be conditionally released and also determines the specific conditions attached to such release. Advice and decisions on conditional release are based on the Criminal Code, the conditional release policy, and case law. Based on case law, appeal court decisions, the process for early release needs to be started at least 2 months prior to the early release date. This never happens. Why is there a backlog on the advices from the CCR? Are they still functioning? How many members does the CCR have? What is the time frame they need to advise? What is the reason inmates don't get their decisions on early release on time? The Early Conditional Release Working Group, de vervroegde voorwaardelijke invrijheidstelling, discusses and determines whether a prisoner qualifies for early conditional release due to lack of cell capacity. The Probation/Parole Office, SGIS, the Judicial Affairs Department within the Ministry of Justice, and the prison, as well as the OM, which is responsible for the execution of criminal court decisions, are represented in the working group. And they jointly determine whether a person is eligible for early conditional release. As soon as it's determined who is eligible for early conditional release, both the prison and the probation office set up their report and their advice, which is then sent to the CCR for final advice to the minister. The CCR should by law consist of at least 3 members, including the chairperson and a deputy who are appointed by the Minister of Justice, and also a secretary who is to be provided from the Ministry of Justice. I can report that the CCR is fully functional and consists at the moment of 4 members and a secretary. I also make reference to this Wednesday's newspaper article on the CCR and also the publication in the National Gazette last week, which outlines some recent appointments that I did to the CCR to ensure that the board was, again, complete and that they can function adequately. The CCR requires on average 2 weeks to issue an advice once all necessary documentation regarding the prisoner eligible for conditional release has been received. This may be longer if the prisoner must be heard as part of the process. According to the CCR, there's no backlog in the issuing of advice on conditional or early conditional release cases. Delays in decision-making are exceptional, and when they occur, they are generally caused by delays in initiating the conditional release procedure. The early conditional release policy document will also be shared with Parliament and details the process in detail. Then I'll just bundle questions 12 and 13 and take them together. Or 12 and 13 I have on my paper here, but the former minister published a so-called early release and ankle bracelet policy. In this policy for early release, due to lack of cell space under ankle bracelet or other conditions, it is at the discretion of the minister, it states. Verbally, it is mentioned that they have an extra 6-month deduction on their time if there is a situation they need the cell. Shouldn't there be a transparent policy that applies for all? Because now how do you decide, Minister, who gets released before their time? And then to tack on to that, Minister, now that we have a serious problem with cell capacity and suspects are being released after a couple days from police custody and adults are being detained at MLC, how come we have not introduced the old policy on early release again, which the former Minister Duncan had cancelled for no reasons? Aruba and the BES and Curaçao all have this policy. Where is the policy for St. Martin? As far as I know, the so-called early release and ankle bracelet policy was first implemented by the first Minister of Justice of this country, Mr. Roland Duncan. And this was done under the ministerial regulation on electronic monitoring at the time. The regulation provided for the possibility that a prisoner could, by way of leave the prison 1 to 6 months prior to their conditional release, on the condition that they had to be placed under electronic monitoring. In practice, the prisoner effectively receives a reduction of 1 to 6 months on their prison sentence through the leave under electronic monitoring. This regulation was revoked in 2015 due to the coming into effect of our new Wetboek van Strafrecht, Penal Code. It follows from the conditional release arrangement in the Penal Code itself that every convicted individual, with exception of those serving short sentences, must serve 2/3 of their sentence unless this period is reduced pursuant to Article 137 due to a lack of available cell capacity. Upon entry into force of the new Penal Code, any informal reductions in the execution of the sentence, such as those regulated in the regulation on electronic monitoring, had to be abolished. So in here, when I saw the question, it was abolished for no reason. There was a reason, and it was namely that it was in contravention of the new Penal Code. For cases involving cell shortages, Article 137 of the Penal Code allows only early conditional release with or without electronic monitoring for those closest to their natural release dates or for those who have served significant portions of their sentences. The decision to grant early conditional release falls under the authority of the Minister of Justice after having received advice of the prison director, probation office, and the CCR or the court of guardianship in the case of juveniles.
SXM, your social and health insurance is SXM, your social and health insurance is.
Are you SXV insured? Do you have a valid medical insurance status? SXV is cardless. Request your My SXV account today and enter the virtual office of SXV. Go to sxv.sx and sign up now.
SXM, yeah, your social and health insurance is.
My question is regarding the SAHA, or the General Health Insurance. Have you had an opportunity now to familiarize yourself with the legislation? Have you read it? And in all discussions with other countries in the past about their general health insurance or universal health insurance, a critical component as to the success or failure of that has been determining what is an appropriate package of coverage. Are you familiar now with what the current proposal is for that package, and are you comfortable and in agreement with that?
I have not completely read the documents. I've started already, but I've also been involved in two presentations, one at the university and the other one while I was a member of parliament. I think SAHA is not the, we call it National Health Insurance, is not the only solution, not the only solution for the situation we are in with regard to our health. The health insurance. But I had a conversation with SER, and they assured me that by the end of the first quarter, this information, their report will be delivered to us. And once I go through those documents, then I can form a final decision on how we're going to move forward pertaining to the SAHA. But it is, I have started looking into the matter as well, though.
You just mentioned that it's not the only sort of critical part of our healthcare system, but it is a critical part in terms of laying out the financial structure for that healthcare system. So getting the financial picture right, in other words, enough premiums collected and managing the expenditure is a huge part of our healthcare system. So what else is more important than streamlining that cost versus revenue part? of our healthcare system?
No, in this, when I say it's not the only, because everyone seems to look at the national health insurance as the only solution to resolve the issues that we're in. And that's what I meant by it's not the only solution. There are other things as well that have to come in play with regard to addressing our financial situation when it comes to our health insurance situation. But again, that's why I said I would need to look at all the different aspects and also have meetings with stakeholders, even outside of SZV, in order for me to have a better understanding and also to present a better overview of the best solution moving forward from VSR under this ministry.